Hi, this is Andrew Gaughan, and I'm going to be demonstrating for you in this tutorial how to work the top edging and straps for my honeysuckle top pattern. This is a completed sample to show you how the result is going to look. First, there is an applied I-cord worked along the underarm edges, and then there is an I-cord strap worked, and then that is continued across the top, and then the second strap is worked, and it's done exactly the same on both sides. So now that you see how it's going to look, I'm going to demonstrate how to do this. I recommend going ahead and beginning the straps after you've worked about 1 inch of the body. This is going to allow you to try on the top as you work the remainder of the body to make sure you can get it the exact right length for you. And I went ahead and put it on a cord. Usually I would just put end stoppers on my needles, but they were clanking around as I was filming. And I also want to note I wove in the ends just to make it easier to see what I'm doing, but that's not really necessary. You don't have to weave in your ends before beginning this. We are going to start by working an applied I-cord along one of the underarms. So I'll start on this side. They're identical, so it doesn't matter which side you do first. And we're going to work an applied I-cord starting here along one side, along the underarm cast on, and then up the other side. And as we go along the edges, we're going to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. And then along the underarm cast on, we're going to be picking up 1 stitch for every cast on stitch. To start the applied I-cord, you're going to make a slip knot. Put that first stitch on your needle. And then you can use the backwards loop cast on to cast on 3 additional stitches. And we are working a 4-stitch applied I-cord, and there are our 4 stitches, and we're ready to attach it to the work. Make sure you work with your working yarn and not the yarn tail. It's easy to make that mistake. And we're going to want to pick up a stitch into the very top stitch, and we're going to have a full selvage stitch on the end. So you're not going to want to pick up stitches so that there is only 1 leg here. You're going to pick up a full stitch into the end, and there will always be 2 legs of stitches there. So now we have 5 stitches on our needle, and we're going to pull the needle all the way to the other end. And then we're going to work across these 5 stitches starting on the other side. And if you haven't worked an I-cord before, it's the exact same concept as a regular I-cord, where we're knitting these 4 stitches in a circle, and here we have the 4 stitches being combined with a 5th stitch that we picked up each time we circle around. So for the first 3 stitches, we're going to simply knit. And the last 2 stitches are going to be knit together through the back loop. We're back to 4 stitches, and we're going to pick up another stitch along the end. Now we are going to repeat that entire process. Slide the stitches to the other end of your needle. Knit 3. Knit 2 together through the back loop. And as I said, we're picking up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. So since we've picked up 2 stitches, we're now going to skip a row. So there's a hole here that we're going to skip and go down to the next row. Pick up a stitch. Slide our stitches to the other end of the needle. Knit 3, knit 2 together through the back loop, pick up another stitch, and you're just going to repeat this entire process. And as I said, you're going to be always skipping every 3rd row so that you're picking up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. And after a couple rows are done, you can start to see this little bit of I-cord. Okay, I've now worked all the way down that edge and you can see how that is looking. And now as we're picking up into the underarm cast on stitches, we're going to pick up 1 stitch per cast on stitch. And I like to, in order to create a really neat transition, pick up into the first row of stitches here and here, not into this edge. And either of those would work. I just think picking up into the first row of stitches creates a neater transition. To make sure you get every stitch, you're going to be picking up into a purl column. Continue your applied I-cord as usual. And then you're going to be picking up into a knit column. And continue the applied I-cord as usual. Then, once you've worked all the way across this edge and you've just picked up your very last stitch, as you work the final 5 stitches, you're just gonna knit 1, knit 2, bind off, and then when there's the last 2, you can knit 2 together and bind off. And then cut the yarn and pull the yarn tail through that last loop. And here's how that edge looks. And you're next going to repeat that exact same process on the other side. Now that we have the armhole trim on both sides complete, we are going to start the first strap. So again, make a slip knot. Cast on 3 additional stitches. And now we're going to work a 4-stitch I-cord 19 inches in length. So it's the same process as the applied I-cord, except for there's no need to pick up a 5th stitch and then knit them together. You're just going to take these 4 stitches, slide them to the other end of your needle, knit all 4 stitches, and repeat. Slide, knit 4. Slide, knit 4. And it's going to take a few rounds for it to start to really look like an I-cord, but as you go, you can just kind of tug on the little tail that's created, and that will help get all those stitches in a nice little tube. And then once you can actually see a bit of tube forming, you might notice that the stitch that's on this reverse side might look a little looser than the others. But as you work, if you keep just tugging and kind of let those stitches fall in place, it will even out pretty well and become a similar size to the other ones. But you also can make sure that when you slide, you're knitting the first stitch tightly and not leaving it too loose. And that will help make the cord even all the way around. And if there's any little unevenness still left as you're working, it will even out just fine when you block. So don't worry about it. So just continue this until you have a full 19 inches of I-cord. Once you've worked 19 inches of I-cord and you want to measure it with it nice and stretched out, you are going to start working applied I-cord across the top. And you're going to start by picking up 2 stitches into the very end of the applied I-cord from the underarm stitches. And what I did to make it as neat a join as I could is picked up a stitch into one of the stitches on the front and then go all the way into one of the stitches on the back. And attach that as we did before. Knit 3, knit 2 together through the back, and then again you want to pick it up all the way through knit 3, knit 2 together through the back loop. Now make a nice and neat join between the 2 different sections of I-cord, and then work along the cast on stitches exactly the same way you did at the underarm cast on. And again, I like to, instead of picking up stitches into the actual cast on, I like to pick them up into the first row of stitches. And we are picking up 1 stitch for every cast on stitch. And once you get to this other side, again, work 2 stitches into the I-cord on this side and go all the way through into 1 stitch on the front, out a stitch on the back. Both times you pick up those 2 stitches. And you're going to continue in exactly the same manner to work another 19-inch strap on the other side, and then the strap for the back is going to be worked exactly the same. 1 continuous I-cord, making first strap across the front and second strap. And then here's a tip for when you're weaving in the ends that start and end these I-cords. You can take this end and just insert it into the very center of the I-cord. And then you want to put the needle as far down into the I-cord as you can without coming out any of the holes. So you see the needle is completely inside the I-cord. And then pick a spot to come out. You can cut this end right just a teeny bit after where it comes out. Stretch this to let that end go back inside. And then you have a very neat end of your strap where you can't see that end that's woven in at all. And again, this is how it'll look when it's all done. You'll have a really neat join between the different sections of I-cord here at the corners. And all of these ends will look nice and neat with those yarn ends hidden inside the I-cord. And then you can decide exactly how long to make this when you're wearing it, but about 4 inches up, you'll just tie these straps into a nice bow, like so. And as you're trying it on, you can adjust that length to be perfect so that the front sits where you want it to on your body, and you're ready to go. And I like to store these straps being not tied when I'm not wearing it, so that way you don't have any creases kind of formed in these permanently. But if you find one spot where you like the bow and you're sure you want to keep it there, then you can just leave the bows tied and you're ready to wear your top.